Welcome, everyone. We are so incredibly glad you are joining us today for a very special, deeply historical deep dive.
Yes, thank you so much for being here with us. We are really excited about this one.
And right up front, we want to set the stage for how we are going to do this today. We are going to be speaking very clearly, very slowly, and, deliberately.
Right.
We want to use simple, accessible English today to really ensure that every single important detail we cover is just, well, that it's easy to follow for you.
Exactly. Because the concepts we are tackling are big, but they don't need to be confusing. So we're just going to take our time and walk through it all together.
I love that. Okay, so let's set the scene. If you ask almost anyone, just a random person on the street, to picture early American history, or maybe the classic American Wild West, they usually picture something very specific.
Oh, absolutely. They picture English colonies, right? Jamestown, the Pilgrims having Thanksgiving, or they picture a Native American warrior riding a horse across a massive, open, grassy plain.
Right. And that image of the horse on the plains, it feels so ancient, like it's just always been there since the dawn of time.
But it hasn't. And that is the historical plot twist that just completely shatters that illusion.
It really does. Because that iconic image is actually the direct result of Spanish explorers arriving. Long before the Pilgrims ever even saw Plymouth Rock, the Spanish were already here, completely changing the land and the people.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive today is to basically rethink that entire traditional American origin story.
Yes, we are throwing the old timeline out the window. Today's source material focuses exclusively on Spanish exploration in America. We are going to look at the empire, the religious missions, and how they basically created the modern American Southwest.
Because if we want the complete picture of America, we have to look much earlier and we have to look further south and west.
Right. It's a story filled with huge ambition, really messy moral conflicts, and this intense cultural mixing that left behind what our sources call fossils of history.
I love that phrase, fossils of history.
Me too. And they are still totally visible in modern America today. You just have to know what you're looking at.
Exactly. So before we look at those lasting impacts, we really need to establish that the starting line of American history was drawn a long, long time before any English settlers arrived.
All right, let's redraw that map. So following Columbus's voyages, Spain almost overnight becomes just one of the most powerful empires on the planet.
Right.
But what were they actually after? Like, what was the motivation?
Well, Spanish leaders and explorers were driven by a very specific mix of desires. They wanted gold, they wanted silver, they desperately needed new trade routes, they wanted physical territory, and this is crucial, they had a burning desire to spread their religious influence.
Okay, let's unpack this word empire for a second. Because when we think of an empire today, we might think of, massive global businesses like tech companies.
Yeah, abstract things.
Right, abstract networks. But back then, an empire was a literal physical hunger for land and resources that pushed people across massive, dangerous oceans.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it wasn't just about money. For the Spanish crown, wealth and their belief systems were totally tied together.
How so?
Well, they believed that spreading their Catholic faith was their duty, right? And to do that globally, they needed money. So the gold funded the religion, and the religion justified taking the gold.
Wow, so they didn't see it as hypocritical at all. It was just one single mission.
Exactly. They fed into each other perfectly.
But, ambition is one thing. Actually doing it is another, which brings us to the physical journey.
Right. Because ambition requires action.
And these explorers had to cross some of the hardest, most brutal environments on Earth.
Oh, well, the geography was just completely unforgiving. We are talking about trekking through massive deserts, freezing mountains, thick forests, and endless coastlines.
And heavy clothing and armor.
Yes. Imagine walking through the swamps of Florida or the deserts of what is now Arizona and New Mexico, or all the way to California, mostly on foot.
It's just wild to think about. But we really need to push back on this word exploration.
Yeah, that word can be a bit misleading.
It is, because it's easy to picture a lone explorer, standing on a hill with a map, admiring nature. But it's more like someone showing up at your house, deciding they live there now, and bringing an entire army's worth of new rules.
That is a perfect way to put it, because the land was not empty. There were millions of native peoples who already lived there.
Right. The explorers weren't just simple visitors. They represented an empire that wanted control. And, frankly, they wanted cheap labor.
What's fascinating here is the sheer moral complexity of it all. You have to look at both sides of the coin.
What do you mean by that?
Well, on one hand, the exploration expanded European knowledge of the globe, and it showed incredible almost unbelievable physical human courage to survive those environments.
Sure, the survival aspect is intense.
But simultaneously, at the exact same time, it introduced severe conflict, total conquest, and domination for the native peoples. They brought weapons, a new religion, European goods, and
diseases.
yes, devastatingly, they brought European diseases.
Which the native peoples had zero immunity to.
Right. It wiped out entire communities before they even saw a Spanish soldier. So you have to hold both of those truths in your head at once. Incredible human endurance and devastating destruction.
That is heavy, but it's the truth. And speaking of new things brought over by the Spanish, let's talk about one specific introduction that completely changed the landscape almost immediately.
Ah, yes. The horse.
The horse. We mentioned it at the beginning. The introduction of horses to North America by the Spanish just totally revolutionized life for many native peoples, especially on the plains.
It was a massive, massive technological shift.
Right. Because before the horse, if you wanted to hunt a buffalo, which is a huge, fast, dangerous animal, you had to do it on foot.
Which is dangerous and uses up a ton of energy for very little reward.
But with a horse,
Yeah.
suddenly you have speed, you have stamina, you can hunt efficiently, you can travel further, you can trade over longer distances.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It completely changed warfare, too.
Yes, because we often picture native plains peoples with horses as this timeless, ancient image. But that dynamic was actually a direct result of this specific Spanish arrival.
Exactly. And colonization didn't just change the relationship between Europeans and native peoples. It actually changed the relationships among the native communities themselves.
Wait, really? How did it do that?
Well, think about it. If your group gets horses first and you master riding them, you suddenly have a huge military advantage over a neighboring group that doesn't have horses yet.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah, it led to totally new alliances, and it shifted power dynamics across the entire continent. Some groups became incredibly powerful very quickly.
All because of one animal.
Yes, but while horses were changing the open plains, the Spanish were trying to control the land in a very different way.
Right. They weren't just riding around. They were trying to build something permanent.
Through the mission system.
Okay, we really need to break this down because the mission system is so crucial.
It is the absolute core of how they operated.
So missions were basically religious communities organized by Spanish missionaries, usually Catholic priests, right?
Correct. And their main goal was to convert native peoples to Christianity, specifically Catholicism, and to extend Spanish control over the land.
But, and this is important, missions were far more than just churches.
Oh, absolutely. They were not just a building where you went to pray on a Sunday.
Right. So, what does this all mean? A mission was essentially a self-contained town. It was a machine designed to change how people lived every single day.
Yes. They were centers of colonial administration. They had farming, labor, and education. If you looked at a mission, you'd see chapels, sure,
Yeah.
but also huge workshops, massive agricultural fields, housing blocks, and storage areas.
It was a total 247 lifestyle takeover.
Which raises an important question about institutions.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, there is always a duality to institutions. On one hand, an institution like a mission can provide structure. It can provide new farming education or a stable food supply, and for the priests, spiritual ideals.
But on the other hand,
It can be used to enforce political power, completely suppress traditional cultures, and severely limit human freedom.
right, it's control, plain and simple. So with these massive self-contained towns just dropping into the landscape, how did the native peoples react? Because that's a sudden, immense amount of pressure.
It really was. And their reactions were highly complex. Native peoples did not simply accept Spanish control.
It wasn't just a binary, right? Like, they didn't just totally surrender or entirely fight to the death.
Exactly. It's a spectrum. Some interacted with the missions for trade, or they went there for protection from other groups, or just for basic survival in a world that was changing way too fast.
Yeah, if your food sources are disappearing, a mission farm looks pretty good.
Right. But others fiercely resisted.
How do they do that?
Sometimes they just fled, they ran away. Sometimes they outright refused or launched armed rebellions. And sometimes they negotiated to protect their family life and their traditional culture.
Because mission life often required them to completely abandon their own language, right?
Yes, their language, their work patterns, their social customs, and they rarely had a free choice in the matter.
It's a perspective shift. Because it's easy to look back and think people either violently fought or totally gave up. But interacting with these missions just for survival shows incredible adaptability.
It does. It shows that Native communities actively try to protect their identity. And as we look at this history, we have to ask critical questions.
Like what?
Like, in this situation, who had the power? Who lost power?
Right.
Who actually benefited from this system and who suffered?
Those are the questions that make history real, because this complex mixing of survival, of coercion, of shifting powers over literally hundreds of years, it created a region that is completely unique in the American story.
The American Southwest.
Yes, the Southwest. Our sources describe it as a cultural crossroads.
A place where completely different paths meet and blend together.
Let's break down the layers of history in this region, because it's like painting a beautiful picture on a canvas, but never erasing the old layers.
That's a great analogy.
The Native, the Spanish, the Mexican layers, they all bleed through into the modern American painting.
Exactly. So the base layer is the Native peoples, who were there first for thousands of years.
Right.
Then you add the layer of Spanish explorers and missionaries. Then history moves forward, and you get the Mexican history layer after Spain loses control.
And then finally,
the westward expansion of the United States. So you have 4 distinct layers stacked on top of each other.
and this makes American culture so diverse depending on the geography, right?
Totally. The history of New England, like Virginia or Massachusetts, is fundamentally different from the history of New Mexico or California.
Because New England doesn't have those exact same deep layers.
Right. Geography and culture are permanently connected. You can't separate the history of the Southwest from the physical ground it happened on.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite part of this deep dive.
The fossils.
Yes, the fossils of history. Because you don't have to look in a dusty history book or go to a museum to see these cultural layers. You just have to look at a map or a menu or literally the street you live on.
The Spanish influence is highly, highly visible today. It is everywhere.
Let's give some examples, starting with place names. Because the map of the American West is basically written in Spanish.
It really is. Think about major cities. Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Antonio, Santa Fe, San Diego, Las Vegas, the seat of Colorado.
It's incredible. And anything starting with San or Santa connects directly to those Spanish Catholic missionary traditions. They name places after saints.
Right. San Francisco is St. Francis.
I absolutely love the idea that saying Los Angeles is actually speaking history. We use these words every single day to complain about traffic or talk about a vacation without realizing we are preserving the memory of a 16th century empire.
They are literal fossils of history.
Yeah.
And culture does not disappear just because political borders change. Language carries history and identity and worldview.
It proves that America's Spanish roots are incredibly deep. But it's not just words, is it? It's architecture, too.
Oh, definitely. If you walk around the Southwest or California, you see mission-style buildings everywhere.
The adobe structures.
Yes. Adobe, which is basically mud brick. You see interior courtyards, those beautiful arched walkways, and the red clay tile roofs.
And those weren't just for looks, right? They made sense for the hot desert climate.
Exactly. It was a practical blending of native building techniques and Spanish styles that worked perfectly for that specific environment.
And we have to talk about the food.
Of course. You can't talk about culture without food.
The food in the Southwest is a direct mix of Spanish, Mexican, and native traditions.
It's a fusion. You have European meats like beef and pork, mixed with native crops like corn, beans, and chili peppers. Every time you eat a taco, you are tasting a historical crossroads.
And then there's religion and language, Catholic traditions, local festivals, and obviously the widespread everyday use of the Spanish language. It never went away.
No, it didn't. It's been spoken continuously in that region for centuries.
So recognizing all of these cultural fossils everywhere, it really forces us to rethink what the overall American story actually is.
Because America is not only an English-speaking story, it's just not.
Right. It is a deeply multicultural story. It includes Native, Spanish, African, French, and all the immigrant histories combined.
And real history is not simple. It's not a fairy tale. It is not just good people here, bad people there.
Yeah, we like to make things black and white, but history is gray.
It's about imperfect people making choices based on their beliefs, their fears, their ambitions, and sometimes just pure survival.
And those choices resulted in both amazing courage and terrible suffering.
Exactly.
So if someone says America is only an English story, they are missing a massive, massive part of the truth. Spanish history isn't outside American history. It's right inside it. It's foundational.
And studying history this way, looking at all the messy layers, it has real value today.
Why is that? Why does looking backward help us right now?
Because it makes us more thoughtful citizens. It makes us better communicators. It allows us to hold more than one truth at the same time.
Which we desperately need right now.
We really do. When you understand this deep background, it helps you understand modern debates about rights, about land, and about identity. You can't understand today if you don't know the layers that built it.
That is so true. Okay, let's slowly and clearly recap what we've covered in this deep dive today.
Sure. We started with the early ambitions of the Spanish Empire, which predated English settlements by a long shot. They wanted wealth, and they wanted religious expansion.
We talked about the vast, super difficult geography they covered and the moral duality of the mission system they built.
Right, the missions brought structure, but also forced labor and cultural suppression.
We looked at the complex spectrum of native responses, from quiet adaptation for survival all the way to armed resistance.
We discussed the transformative power of the horse and how it completely changed life and power dynamics on the plains.
And finally, we explored those lasting cultural fossils. The place names, the architecture, the food, the things that make the American Southwest a truly rich cultural crossroads.
And we want to remind you, the listener, that practicing this kind of deep historical thinking, it doesn't just improve your trivia knowledge.
No, it helps you understand the modern American conversations happening all around you today. The history is still happening.
It really is.
So we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder. It's based on that idea from our source that culture does not disappear just because political borders change.
Right. The lines on a map change, but the people and the culture remain.
So tomorrow morning, when you are walking or driving around, we want you to really look at your own surroundings.
Yeah, pay attention to the details.
Look at the everyday words, your favorite local foods, or the building styles in your own hometown. Ask yourself, what hidden fossils of an older forgotten culture are sitting right there in plain sight? What predates the modern borders drawn on your map?
Because the past is definitely still present, if you just know how to look for it.
It absolutely is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you for listening.